A tropical storm or hurricane is likely to form in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean over the next few days, and this is going to bring some pretty hefty impacts to parts of the United States, anywhere from Florida, Alabama, or Mississippi, all the way back up the East Coast, and it could even impact areas back over Nova Scotia as we go later into the week. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about this tropical wave that's developing in the Caribbean Sea right near Cuba, and why this could pose some pretty hefty impacts to a large chunk of the United States. We are going to begin with what's happening right now on the infrared imagery, and this is the area of interest right now. We do have a tropical wave that is just to the east of Cuba, and this is the area of concern over the next few days. At this time, it is just a disorganized area of thunderstorm activity. There's nothing really that organized quite yet, but as we go later into today and into tonight, this will likely kind of flirt here right near Cuba, and depending on where it is will matter a lot for where it goes beyond today. In addition to that, how intense it gets over the next few days, because if we see a more westerly track of this wave, that would be almost worst case scenario in a way, where we could see this be much more intense. But if it kind of rides up Cuba and goes into Florida and then eventually goes back into the Atlantic Ocean, that could also be a bad scenario, but it would not be as bad for Florida aside from the flooding rain impacts. And we're going to talk more details on what's expected basically and what I think will happen here in just a few minutes. But the general gist right now is that this is not really organized yet, and it should start to organize over the next 12 to 24 hours. Back over in the Midwest, we do have a low pressure system that did spawn some showers and thunderstorms yesterday. Nothing we really had to go live for yesterday. It was mostly just damaging winds across the Ohio Valley. Also, another complex of thunderstorms blew up late last night across parts of Oklahoma and even Texas, where we had some big hail and wind events over in those areas. And this is another view on the infrared imagery of where the location of this low pressure system currently is, and it's just now to the east of Cuba, and it is making an approach. We've had some pretty big thunderstorms develop, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are seeing organization quite yet. It is still interacting with a lot of land, so over the next 24 hours, I think as it gets away from land, if it's able to, I think we will begin to start to see at least some organization, and we could see a tropical depression or even a low-end tropical storm as early as tonight or tomorrow morning. Now let's talk a little bit more about the track and where we are expecting Invest 97L to go. As of now, it is an Invest. It is not yet a named storm. Once it is named, it'll be named Debbie. That is our next name, which would be the fourth tropical system of the year in the Atlantic Ocean. And again, notice right now, this is where the ensembles have the location of the low pressure, so it's just to the east of Cuba, at least at the time recording this forecast. As we go later into today, this will continue to move across Cuba. Most of the ensembles do show this system basically staying over Cuba today. There are a couple outliers that bring this further to the west and move it actually to the south and west of Cuba, which would be worse, because what would happen is that this would be over really warm Gulf of Mexico waters for a longer period of time, meaning rapid intensification is something that we wouldn't rule out in that case. But with the most recent data that we are seeing, we've actually seen a shift back to the east comparatively to yesterday. A lot of the models are bringing this back over near like Panama City yesterday. Now they are really focused in on the Big Bend of Florida and back near Tampa. So there's kind of a wide variety still, but that's an area that's being more honed into for the potential for a landfall out of this tropical system. Now, I do want to point out the ensembles are not showing much intensification. They are only showing really just a tropical storm, maybe a low-end hurricane upon landfall in Florida this weekend or into very early next week. Once we go later into the week, that's where there is a massive wild card. And if we drew a cone of uncertainty right now, it would be literally huge, because there are a couple of things that could happen. We have a high pressure system that's our Bermuda high back over to the east of where this system is, and then we also have a high pressure system that's going to move in back over in the southern plains. What this is basically going to do is kind of just stall out this system, because high pressure systems, they're going to spin in this direction, meaning that there's nothing really going to be steering this particular tropical system. That basically means we could see some sort of significant flooding threat evolve, and this could actually stall, do some loops. It could go literally anywhere. So it could go back to the west towards Louisiana. It could go to the northeast, but very slowly up the east coast, perhaps producing significant flooding in the Carolinas. So there are a lot of scenarios that could end up happening. Now, this is also another run of ensembles, and just notice again, the general location of landfall is basically from Panama City, even as far south and east as Miami. So there's a pretty wide variety of where we could see this tropical system goes. I think what's going to be key though today is where this goes today, because once we know where the low pressure is today, we'll probably have this more calibrated, and we should have a better idea of where this will go. These ensembles in particular don't really loop it a whole lot here in the southeast, but it does still stall a bit over Georgia, which could lead to, again, significant flooding somewhere in the southeast. It could be multiple states. It also could be a localized area somewhere, maybe like Georgia, for example. So we are watching that potential very closely. Here's also the spaghetti charts on Invest 97L, various computer models showing where this could go. Again, notice how it just curves off to the north and east as we go into this weekend and into early next week. Back over between the Big Bend of Florida, which is this little region here, and then back near Tampa, which is the west coast of Florida. That is where we think landfall will happen, but we could see this shift a little bit more over the next 24 hours. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll continue to keep you posted with the latest on anything that does happen with this particular system. Once we go into early next week, it is likely to be slow moving as it moves up the east coast of the United States, which is what I think will happen. I don't think this is going to loop back to Louisiana, even though some models show that. I think that this will be very slow moving, but it will be something that moves up the east coast of the United States, which could lead to intensification just off the coast of the Carolinas as we go into the middle of this upcoming week. Here are some of the computer models giving you an idea of intensity on this particular system for the next several days. Most models don't bring this above a tropical storm upon landfall in Florida as we go late into this weekend, but one thing we'll have to watch for is where this exactly goes, because that'll really determine the intensity of this. I wouldn't rule out that this goes a little bit more bonkers as it moves back into the Atlantic Ocean if it does so as we go into the middle of next week just off the coast of the Carolinas. I wouldn't be surprised if this did get closer to a category 2 or 3 hurricane. It's not something that would shock me. Now let's jump more into these scenarios of what could happen with this potential tropical storm as we go into the weekend and eventually into next week. Before we go too far into it though, I want to show you yesterday's GFS model run, because this will give you an idea of what it showed before and what it's showing now. It is a major difference, and if you watched yesterday's forecast, you would have seen this. The GFS model literally had a really strong hurricane sitting off the coast of Florida all throughout the week, literally just sitting there dumping 30 to 40 inches of rain, and then it moved into like Mississippi and Louisiana, which was a crazy scenario to begin with. Well, the GFS model has become a bit more stable, if you will. It's at least showing something more realistic in my opinion. So this is what the GFS model shows as we go into Sunday morning. It actually has it making landfall near Tampa as a tropical storm, and then once we go into Monday, it moves back into the Atlantic Ocean, which this is definitely a scenario that could happen. I think that this is a very strong possibility, in my opinion, of what will happen as we go into the week. Once we go into Monday into Tuesday, watch this just move to the northeast towards the Carolinas, and then as we go into Tuesday, watch it just stall there, just off the coast of the Carolinas. And if this stays offshore enough, we wouldn't really see a huge flooding concern, but even if it's 20 miles further to the west, we could see potentially catastrophic flooding somewhere near the coastline of North or South Carolina, and then it eventually starts to race more off to the northeast as we go into Wednesday or Thursday. But this is definitely a concern, but again, where this stalls is crucial. We don't know where it's going to stall. We think it will stall to some extent, we just don't know where. And this does obviously bring back some memories maybe of Harvey, where it just stalled off the Texas coast for days on end. I think we could see something similar here, but I'm not saying we're definitely going to see the same impacts, and where those impacts are just so unknown at this point. Now, the European model is taking a more conservative approach when it comes to its intensity. It doesn't really have it as anything as we go into Sunday, just a little tropical wave still, maybe a tropical depression as we go into Monday, and then by Tuesday into Wednesday, look how it just stalls off the coast of South Carolina. Again, it's not really moving much, but it does intensify slowly as a tropical storm, and then eventually makes landfall in North Carolina and doesn't really bring a whole lot when it comes to impacts aside from rainfall, which in my opinion, I think this will be more of a rainmaker, potentially even a tornado threat to areas like Florida. I don't think storm surge is going to be a big deal unless something intensifies and it sits off coast for several days, and I honestly don't think hurricane force winds are going to be that much of a concern either, unless this thing again just goes crazy over the next few days. The GFS model right now is showing a widespread area of at least 1 to 4 inches of rain across Florida. Now notice again offshore here of the Carolinas, there are a lot of areas between 15 to 30 inches of rain. That would be something we need to watch for near the Carolina coast if this system is close enough. The European model, again going more conservative here, just showing a widespread 2 to 5 inches of rain across Florida, and then offshore it shows a lot more rain there. The National Weather Service blended model showing a widespread area here of anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain across Florida, and then the Carolinas possibly seeing the worst of that rainfall. So a lot of things to work out in terms of the details over the next several days. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll be keeping you posted with the latest, and if needed, we will have live coverage on this as it makes landfall. If it isn't needed, I actually might go storm chasing, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We might even have that live here on the channel. We'll kind of just see what happens here over the next few days.